I've been on a huge Hunter x Hunter binge recently, and one of the many reasons I love this show is that as characters get stronger and they have all these crazy abilities, the fights still focus heavily on the mental aspects. A lot of the fights are decided by adapting to the other person's ability, rather than just being stronger or having some broken skills. This inspired me to make a video talking about adapting, so let's get to it. So what exactly does it mean to adapt? Well, it's kind of like an umbrella term that encompasses many different things you can do in a game. You can change your entire playstyle to deal with the way your opponent is approaching your matchup. Some people even think that pros are like 28 steps ahead of you and they're calculating the exact moment you will next spot dodge or something. Obviously this is a stretch, but it's not entirely inaccurate either. We're going to watch this clip of Chaco, a ZSS from Japan, to get a look at what we're going to try to emulate with this video. So we're going to be looking at like a quick 10-second sequence of Chaco against another ZSS. Keep in mind this is game 1, so it's not like he has an entire set to adapt here. So what exactly are we looking at? Well, let's stop it for just a second, and let's see what happens here at the start. Chaco lands with a nair, shields just to see what would happen next. Now ZSS can likely move first, that is Choco's ZSS, but he decides to shield. Notices right away that Kuro rolled. So what happens next? Not even 10 seconds later, a similar situation in which Choco's gonna hit Kuro's shield with a very low barrier happens just about here. Now, last time this happened, Kuro rolled. So what does Chaco do here? With information he got 8 seconds ago that Kuro likes to roll in this situation, he takes the stock for it. That's a big punish. So let's figure out how we can get better at doing the same things in our own matches. So for the sake of this video, we're gonna call these Provoking Moves. I know, boring, unoriginal title, but I got nothing. Anyway, what is this? A move which provokes an immediate response from your opponent. Simple, right? Projectiles are the easiest example of this. When you throw out a projectile, your opponent must deal with it right away, or they will get hit by the projectile, right? But many other moves also accomplish a similar goal. For example, if you space a move on your opponent's shield, which they can't punish, they must now figure a way out of their shield, either offensively or defensively. They can't just sit there and wait in their shield, or it'll whittle down, you might poke them, or you can just grab them. Smash is such a free-flowing game. It can be confusing trying to adapt to all the different ways someone might move around the map and all the different angles they can approach you from, but with the help of Provoking Moves, we can look for a perfect time to analyze and adapt to the options people pick. This is a similar concept to ledge trapping. It is very common knowledge that when one person is at the ledge, they only have a limited amount of options for getting off, but almost everyone knows this, so they consciously try to remain unpredictable when getting off the ledge. Provoking Moves establish a similar scenario in which your opponent must deal with a situation with only a finite amount of options, but if they are unfamiliar with the matchup, they often resort to the same bad habits when trying to escape. Part of what it means to truly learn your character is to figure out how to squeeze every advantage you can from each of their moves. The issue is that low to mid-level players often do not realize how much more they can be getting out of the small interactions. I would like to note that you must already know how to deal with your opponent's response to these moves before you get into the game. Armada and Daigo, two absolute legends in their respective games, have both stated that tournaments are where you go to apply what you've already learned. In an old stream, Armada used the example of taking a test. You can't just show up for a test and begin to adapt to the questions that were given to you. You need to already know the answers before you got there. He compares this to tournaments. You can't just keep taking tests and hoping you get better over time. You need to go back and learn the answers beforehand. In his book, The Will to Keep Winning, Daigo also mentions that tournaments are a playground for people who practice for growth. He mentions that when he comes across something difficult to deal with in a tournament, he writes it down on his phone and learns to deal with it at a later date, as it is too difficult to make big adjustments on the tournament day itself. What I'm getting at here is that in order to adapt to what your opponent is doing, you must already be familiar with the countermeasures. If you are searching for an answer mid-match, it is unlikely you can effectively make the adjustments. So, I will be giving you two quick examples and show you how you can practice adapting to different options your opponent may do when faced with a provoking move. You'll likely need a friend to help you grind these out. But to be honest, the thought counts much more than the execution here. A lot of this can be theory crafted in your head and then specifically practiced versus others. Let's start with ZSS, as this will help us better understand the nuance of the Chaco clip we watched earlier. So the common responses to shielding ZSS's nair might be to grab her, or try to at least, to roll away or even behind her, or to jump out. So now that we've realized that this move limits our opponent's options, we have to hit the lab and see what we could do to punish these options before we even get into the game. So the next time we get into a game and our opponent does block our nair, we have to pay close attention to their next option and keep that in mind. We won't have to think about how to punish them, as we've already practiced these punishes beforehand, and now we just need to trigger that response with another nair on shield. So if you look back to our first example with Choco, when his first Nair is blocked, he chooses to shield to see how Kuro responds. A few seconds later, he makes Kuro's shield a safe bear and uses that information to take the stock. Many characters can do this. Here's an example of Sheik punishing some rolls and grab attempts, but it doesn't have to be just aerials. Let's take a look at Sheik's needles. Not even the actual projectiles themselves, but Sheik simply charging her needles will usually trigger a response from your opponent, as they don't want to get hit by them if she decides to throw the whole batch. So what might your opponent do? Well, they can just try to come at you with a grab or a dash attack. They can run up and shield in case you throw them, or they can also jump, but I forgot to get a clip of that. So how does Sheik deal with this? Well, she can actually cancel her needles very quickly. So she can punish a shield with a grab, can punish any grabs or dash attack attempts by just throwing the needles, and she can also cancel the needle charge with a jump herself, so she can meet you in the air and punish you that way. I don't want to keep this video going on too long, as I feel like this is a lot of work you need to do yourself, as every character has different moves that trigger responses like this. I hope I've helped you to realize that adapting to people doesn't have to be some grand challenge of trying to predict every move your opponent will do and at what time they'll do it. It is much easier to begin to learn how to adapt by learning which situations limit your opponent options and then already knowing how to punish these options. Adaptation is a huge subject, as sometimes you may need to adapt your entire playstyle. For example, if you notice your opponent is swinging with many unsafe moves, you may need to start playing very patiently. But I feel like that's a subject for a different video, and for now I really believe that for most players it is a much better idea to begin to optimize adapting to the micro situations that happen in all of your games and then slowly build from there.